You know what's even more dangerous than an economic crisis? It's when the people who once loved you, who supported you, suddenly turn their backs and cancel all their plans to come to the US. Instead, they choose somewhere else.
Will you be traveling to the States anytime soon?
Not ever. I wouldn't go over the border again.
Canadian Airlines are taking away flights to popular U.S. cities. This after many Canadian vacationers apparently are avoiding the U.S.
For decades, millions of Canadian tourists have helped keep border cities in the U.S. alive. They didn't just bring luggage, they brought life to thousands of hotels, restaurants, malls, and tourist spots. But in 2025, that gateway is quietly, painfully closing. Canadians aren't making loud announcements, they're just not coming anymore. And the moment that flow of money dries up, a whole bunch of American cities start to crack piece by piece. Empty stores, hotels cutting staff, real estate prices falling day after day. Today, let's uncover the 10 U.S. cities heading into a tourism winter, no snow, but colder than ever before. Seattle, Washington. Seattle has long been a multi-layered destination for Canadians, a weekend getaway spot, a shopping stopover, and a place to escape the brutal winter cold. But under the pressure of a fierce boycott wave, the tourism heartbeat is clearly slowing down, not because of natural disasters or a pandemic, but due to a quiet retreat from our northern neighbors. Cross-border trips from British Columbia into Seattle dropped nearly 18% in the first quarter of 2025, according to data from King County's tourism department. This didn't just hit hotels and restaurants, it also pushed many local retail stores, malls, and tourism services into a soft, open, shaky hand situation. Many shops around Pike Place Market, once thriving on weekend cash from Canadian visitors, are now seeing revenues drop by 25 to 40%. Airport shuttle services from SeaTac to suburban resorts, once fully booked, have had to cut back trips. Small inns in Ballard and Capitol Hill are starting to shorten their hours, opening only on holidays. Seattle residents aren't losing sleep over missing tourists. They're losing sleep over the negative numbers on their bills. With tourism income shrinking, local government has been forced to raise certain taxes to balance the budget. Prices for cleaning services, parking fees, even hotel rooms for domestic travelers have begun creeping up. A family dinner at a mid-range restaurant can now easily top $100, something uncommon just a few years ago. Businesses importing food from Canada to support Seattle's culinary scene are also reporting rising costs. The absence of Canadian tourists has disrupted the two-way flow, making operations more expensive for many restaurants. And when ingredient prices rise, no menu can hold steady for long. Seattle once proudly called itself a city of multicultural connection, but now a vital link is slowly breaking. No noise, no protests, just fewer Canadian license plates on the roads until they disappear altogether. And if you think these effects are limited to downtown, wait until you see what's happening at a destination once considered a border icon between the two countries. Niagara Falls, New York. In Niagara Falls, nothing runs on a clock, it runs on the flow of tourists. When that flow stops, the whole city seems to slow down. And in 2025, that slowdown is turning into a full stop. The Rainbow Bridge, once a symbol of borderless connection between the US and Canada, is now unusually quiet. Ontario plates, which used to line up every weekend, are now just scattered here and there. No barricades have been put up. No rules have changed. But it seems like the trust between the two sides has cracked a crack the news doesn't report. According to the Niagara USA Tourism Board, Canadian visitors crossing into New York dropped over 40% in the second quarter of 2025. For a city where more than 60% of tourism revenue comes from northern visitors, this isn't just a shock, it's a deep cut into the local economic lifeline. Dozens of hotels that had just started recovering from the pandemic are now forced to close parts of their floors due to falling occupancy. Many riverfront restaurants that once served bilingual menus have packed away their French signs saying they're no longer needed. Souvenir shops selling everything from fridge magnets to waterfall logo t-shirts are switching to seasonal operations because there aren't enough customers to stay open year-round. What's unique about Niagara Falls is that the damage isn't from what's lost, but from what was supposed to arrive. Local investors have delayed or canceled numerous hotel projects, entertainment centers, and food complexes originally planned to welcome Canadian tourists. Not because they're pessimistic, but because they see no signs that trust is coming back. And that delay creates a vicious cycle. Local workers lose new job opportunities, and supporting industries like construction, transportation, and food supply all come to a halt. Niagara Falls isn't collapsing with a bang like a landslide. It's draining away like the waterfalls behind the resorts, but this time it's the economy drying up. When a city lives off a bridge and that bridge no longer has people crossing, what will keep it standing? At another crossing point on the New York border, the story isn't much better, but it's playing out differently, quietly, and persistently. Plattsburg, New York. Plattsburg isn't a flashy tourist spot with famous landmarks or huge amusement parks. But for Canadians, especially those from Quebec, it used to be a familiar shopping village where they'd drive a few hours to fill their trunks with cheap American goods, take a quick break before continuing their journey, or just enjoy the different shopping experience across the border. Now the parking lots that used to be packed with Quebec plates every weekend are slowly emptying out. No new barricades, no changes in customs rules. But Canadians are choosing to stop coming. No trips, no spending, no goodbyes. At Champlain Centre Mall, once dubbed the Mall for Quebecers, foot traffic has dropped 38% compared to last year. Stores like Target, Kohl's, and Best Buy in the area are seeing sharp weekend sales declines leading to reduced hours and even earlier Sunday closings. A few coffee chains and restaurants that thrived on Canadian passers-by now rely entirely on locals, a small market that's getting even tougher to survive on. Gas stations and retail supermarkets near the border are also feeling the impact. Gas sales, once an advantage due to cheaper prices than Canada, have plunged with fewer vehicles crossing. One gas station owner told local media they lost over 60% of regular customers in just 6 months. The knock-on effect is that prices on some essentials in Plattsburg are starting to creep up. With a small market size, operating costs have to be spread over fewer consumers, which means locals are paying more for things they used to consider affordable. That feeling of being left behind isn't something you notice overnight, but when a small city suddenly stops getting visits, stops being chosen, it turns into silence. And that silence is growing longer in revenue, in daily rhythm, and in faith. Farther west, there's another city also dependent on visitors, but instead of silence, it's bearing its pain in the anxious lines etched across its workers' faces. Bellingham, Washington. Some cities don't need to be bustling to thrive, they just need consistency. Bellingham is one of those. It's not loud or flashy, but it's always maintained a steady flow of visitors thanks to its strategic location, less than a 30-minute drive from the Canadian border. But that steady rhythm has now vanished. Bellingham once had a strange pulse. Big supermarkets worked overtime on weekends, not for locals, but for Canadians. Some retail chains added French-speaking cashiers. Some pharmacies even updated their prices in Canadian dollars. But all that is quietly being undone, as quietly as the northern visitors disappearing from the parking lots. The retreat of Canadians isn't a wave, but more like a receding tide, silent, but leaving a cold emptiness behind. The number of visitors from Vancouver, Burnaby, Surrey, and other places dropped sharply starting March 2025. No one gives a clear reason, no boycott announced. But locals know well it's a choice. And Bellingham is no longer the favored destination. The fallout, businesses that live off regular visits like pharmacies, gas stations, and big supermarkets are lowering their expectations all at once. Fuel consumption has dropped more than 25%, forcing some gas stations to close early on Saturdays. Pharmacies report a surge in unsold stock, especially products that only sold well on weekends. One organic food retail chain permanently shut down after no longer seeing familiar faces from the north. Worse, some supermarkets that once kept prices low thanks to the high volume now have to raise prices. And as milk, bread, and diapers get more expensive, the ones paying the price are none other than Bellingham's own residents. When a small city depends on a steady rhythm of visits, losing a few hundred visitors a week is enough to throw a wrench in the gears. Not a collapse, but a slow, sure slide. Just like another sunny place starting to realize some damages don't come from a storm, but from the people who once came, no longer coming back. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. In Fort Lauderdale, tourism isn't just an industry, it's the city's heartbeat, and that heartbeat is beginning to skip. On paper, Fort Lauderdale is a dream destination for any vacation. Lover, long beaches, mild weather, premium services, and a wide range of hotels and resorts. But in 2025, many high-end hotels here are facing a cruel paradox: empty rooms they can't afford to discount, and fully staffed teams with no guests to serve. Canadians used to make up a large portion of the winter crowd, especially the snowbirds, older travelers who escaped the cold by spending winters in the American South. But since early this year, their quiet retreat has left a gap no one seems able to fill. Without much noise or announcement, the resale of vacation homes in Broward County has surged over 23% in Q1 2025, most of it driven by Canadian investors pulling out. This triggered a domino effect. Short-term rental apartments once fully booked now sit empty and are forced to slash prices, dragging down rental rates across the region. Small property management firms are caught in cash flow traps, cutting staff and shutting down housekeeping and maintenance services. And it didn't stop there. Upscale restaurants catering to high-end tourists have started shrinking their menus. Golf courses once fully booked throughout winter are now offering unheard-of local discounts, something not seen since the pandemic. Canadian investments in resort spas and water recreation services have also frozen. But what's worrying Fort Lauderdale residents isn't just the slump in the high season. It's the growing sense that an entire era may be ending. When once loyal guests who trusted and chose this city as their winter refuge no longer return, the locals are left wondering who's going to fill that void. And how much time do we have left to adapt? Not far away in a livelier, brighter city, the loss isn't measured in home values or vacancy rates, but in the quiet absence of French voices that used to echo across the boardwalk all holiday season. Long, Orlando, Florida. With dozens of theme parks, Orlando isn't just a travel destination, it's a land of memories where millions of Canadian families have created unforgettable vacations. But in 2025, the city that once echoed with joy is slowly losing its most iconic sound, the laughter of children in Quebecois French. There's no need for an official report. Employees at resorts around Walt Disney World and Universal Studios noticed something different early on. More empty hotel rooms than usual, discounted park tickets released far ahead of schedule, and souvenir shops that once had dedicated French language sections are now quietly taking down their signs. According to Visit Florida, the number of Canadian visitors to Orlando dropped nearly 19% in the first quarter of 2025, but that figure alone doesn't capture the loss of spirit. Canadian tourists aren't just consumers. They tend to stay longer, spend more, and return year after year as a kind of family ritual. And when that ritual is skipped, a part of the city's ecosystem trembles. One thing that makes Orlando unique is its extreme seasonality. A prolonged low season can destabilize the entire year. With Canadian travelers absent, companies that provide transportation, airport shuttles, and family car rentals are cutting hours. Restaurants specializing in North American-style buffets are reporting losses due to over-ordering supplies. The impact spreads beyond tourism. Electronic stores and fashion outlets along International Drive, a shopping hotspot for visitors, are seeing sales plummet. Small vendors in the outdoor markets of Kissimmee, once tailored to French-speaking tourists, are now shifting to serve local residents a completely different consumer base with different spending habits. No protests, no official announcements. When a Canadian family quietly decides not to book their annual trip to Orlando, they're not just changing personal plans, they're unintentionally disrupting a vital economic link in a city built on nostalgia. Across the continent, in another city known for its creativity, coffee, and artsy communities, the absence of loyal foreign visitors is beginning to show in the way stores now hang year-round clearance signs in their windows. Portland, Oregon. In Portland, visitors don't come searching for extravagance, they seek uniqueness. A latte brewed from hand-roasted organic beans, a weekend artisan market, or an independent bookstore with a cozy atmosphere. These create a Portland that stands apart, and Canadians have long been part of that distinct taste. For years, the Canadian community, especially from British Columbia, has viewed Portland as a weekend urban escape. They don't book resorts, but prefer Airbnbs in the Pearl District. They skip malls, choosing instead to explore the small boutiques along Mississippi Avenue. But since early 2025, a strange trend has emerged. Bookings from Canadian accounts have dropped by up to 35%, followed by a wave of last-minute cancellations. No complaints have been voiced, yet Portland residents feel it clearly the difference has lost those who valued it most. What's notable is that Portland's economy doesn't rely on the masses. It thrives on a middle class, with taste people willing to pay $18 for an artistic vegetarian dish, $8 for a handcrafted coffee, $40 for a limited edition vinyl record, and for many years, Canadians have been the most loyal customers of this model. With this group gone, the refined consumer space feels empty. Artisan cafes report sales down over 20%. Art studios cancel workshops due to low registration. Weekend artisan markets lack the presence of those who once gladly spent money on handcrafted jewelry gifts. Worse, small producers dependent on this tasteful consumption are forced to work for mass-market brands. This causes Portland to lose part of its identity, its local character personalization, and the spontaneous spirit that was once the city's soul. And then residents begin to ask if Portland must live like any other generic city. Then what's left of Portland elsewhere in a city buried deep in the industrial heartland? Signs of crisis are not about lost sophistication, but the ever-growing lines of cars waiting outside unemployment centers. Detroit, Michigan. In Detroit, every street bears the footprints of an industrial past. A glorious era, a time of decline, and a difficult path to revival. But in 2025, those footsteps have once again stalled. This time not because of the collapse of the auto industry, but due to the indifference from longtime loyal customers, the Canadians. Located right on the Ontario border, Detroit is not only a manufacturing hub, but also a weekend destination for thousands of Canadians living in Windsor and nearby areas. They drive across the Ambassador Bridge to enjoy a basketball game shop at outlet centers, or simply dine at their favorite steakhouse. But now those trips across the Ambassador Bridge are dwindling. According to data from the Michigan Department of Transportation, personal vehicle crossings from Canada at the Detroit border have dropped by more than 28% in the second quarter of 2025, an unprecedented decline since the pandemic. And this is not just a number, it represents the withdrawal of an entire supporting consumption system from stadiums and movie theaters to retail stores. The Allen Park outlet malls used to be weekend shopping destinations for people from both countries. Now many stores hang deep discount signs year-round, yet still struggle to attract customers. Dental clinics and private hospitals, which served a large number of Canadian patients for consultations and treatments, are forced to scale back services, not due to lack of capacity, but because appointment bookings have dried up. For Detroit, losing Canadian visitors is more than just lost revenue. It means losing a part of the soft connections the city once relied on to rebuild its image. After years of restructuring and attracting investment, the steady presence of Canadians helped breathe a positive and hopeful trade wind into Detroit. Now, as that wind changes direction, many small businesses are considering downsizing or shifting focus to less vibrant domestic markets. Detroit has collapsed before from major shocks, but this time it is not collapsing outright. It is cracking bit by bit. From checkout counters no longer hearing Ontario accents to NBA game tickets being returned because there are no longer fans crossing over to cheer. In another city in the Northeast without auto plants or major basketball leagues, the lines of people queuing for holiday benefits are steadily shortening, and that is a sign of something even more worrying than a drop in revenue. Buffalo, New York. Buffalo has long been accustomed to the regular visits from Canadians not as traditional tourists, but more like neighbors. Located less than a 2-hour drive from Toronto, Buffalo used to welcome thousands of Canadian visitors every weekend without much advertising or major events. Just by opening the doors of the Walden Galleria shopping mall, staff could predict whether this Saturday would be busy or not, simply by looking at the license plates in the parking lot. But in 2025, that habit was broken. What's frightening about Buffalo is not just the drop in visitors, but the feeling that a part of the city has been cut away. Canadians once acted as a familiar foreign breeze that kept the city's life fresh, from hockey games, food festivals, to shopping centers and winter tourism routes. Now merchants around Niagara Street report that Canadian visitors have almost completely disappeared. A longtime pizza place in Elmwood Village, once proud to say, 3 out of every 10 bills come from Ontario, is now putting up its space for sale. Grocery stores specializing in imports from Quebec, which thrived on the cold climate specialty consumption style, have closed 2 out of 4 branches in just the first 5 months of the year. The impact goes beyond the service industry. Private schools, which used to have a significant number of students from Canadian families on semester homestays, have begun scaling back programs. Even some dentists and doctors in Buffalo who served uninsured Canadian patients are facing mass appointment cancellations. From a city once an ideal stop for weekend combined shopping and dental trips, Buffalo now feels like a station where trains no longer stop. Everything still functions, but it's empty waiting and missing something that made it meaningful. Not every place can feel the absence of its neighbors so clearly. But in Buffalo, that gap is like an empty chair at the dinner table. It makes the meal, despite all the dishes taste, incomplete. Further north, another city that once thrived on cross-border kinship is bracing for a winter colder than even the weather forecast, where even the bridges empty of passing people tell the story. Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. If there's any place in the US that once saw the border as nothing more than a river, it's Sault Ste. Marie, 2 cities sharing the same name. One in Michigan and one in Ontario have shared a common culture, a shared rhythm of life, and cross-border handshakes for decades. Here, Canadians and Americans are not just visitors to each other. They are colleagues, business partners, and family. They attend fairs on one side, bowl on the other, and have dinners in both places, all in the course of a single weekend. But then, like a suddenly slackened rope, everything changed earlier this year as fewer and fewer Canadians crossed the international bridge to the US, side of the St. Mary's River. The quiet boycott from the north carries no image of tension or hostility. It happens like a loved one no longer calls as before. And for Sault Ste. Marie on the US side, that is more frightening than any crisis they've ever faced. Family-owned cafes, once sustained by steady streams of visitors from Ontario, have started reducing their hours. A fishing and camping supply store, long a familiar rest stop for caravans of Canadian campers, has closed after 22 summers without a break. The Saturday flea market, once bustling with people from both sides trading handmade goods, now has only a few lonely stalls scattered across the wide square. But the biggest loss is symbolic. The Sault Winter Rendezvous Festival, once a cross-border cultural highlight, was canceled due to a more than 60% drop in registrations from Canada. Nobody wants a festival divided in two. For locals, it's not just a canceled event. It's a period of silence marking a once strong relationship that endured time, weather, and even political upheavals between the two countries. Sault Ste. Marie is not collapsing with noise. It's bleeding little by little, each store, closing each event, canceled each invitation left unanswered across the border. Perhaps that's what worries the people here most, not losing tourists, but losing the feeling of being remembered. And maybe for many other small border communities, that story is quietly becoming their own. When a once close neighbor begins to turn away, the cities that lived on cross-border ties start to wither. No official declarations, no iron fences, just a prolonged silence from the other side is enough to make an entire community feel unsteady. The question is, are Americans being punished by forces beyond their control? And if this bond is completely severed, who will bear the full cost of isolation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Is the city you live in feeling the effects of this silent boycott? This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage secession. All content is presented with the purpose of exploring, analyzing, and sparking discussion based on current events, emotions, and social trends. We respect the U.S. Constitution and all federal regulations. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming content.